retreat series, Dhamma talk number 34. All our talks is about mindfulness-insight meditation, trying to connect the theories and our practical experiences. So just to summarize what this practice is about, you can call it simply in 3 words: arising, observing, and knowing. Those 3 words describe your whole practice: arising, observing, and knowing. And what does arising mean? Arising means all the time there is an object, whether it's a physical object or mental object, always arising, in other words, appearing in your field of attention. Of course, there could be even competing objects arising, but one must choose the most dominant and prominent object. Normally, you can see that object quite clearly, but sometimes there may be 2 objects competing. If that's the case, choose the one that is the most dominant one. That's what it means by arising. It's always happening. And second word is observing. Observing means one must be fully aware, looking at it, watching at it, observing that object that is arising, that dominant object that is arising in your field of attention, with great attention and care, intensely and deeply observing at it. That's what observing is. And the third one is, we call it simply knowing. Knowing means when you are observing an object, you know what it is. Knowing. And in knowing is, we do not try to paint it with all these concepts. What it is, the experience of the object that arises while one is observing. That experience is called knowing. So 3 parts: arising, observing, and knowing. Now, in this pure Vipassana method, Satipatthana Vipassana method, the yogis will come to know something different or seems like different to them based on their experience. Especially for beginners in the sense, one who has not practiced Satipatthana Vipassana, or we can call it in the West Mahasi tradition. If you haven't practiced or experienced that before, you will be a little bit perplexed about this one word. It's called labeling or noting. Labeling or noting. And quite a few people think, oh, that is not that useful or constructive or even practical. That's the way they perceived it. So I like to emphasize about this labeling or noting in this technique. This one is not new. You are asking question, why should we do? What is this? It's not good. It's an obstruction. It's an obstacle. It doesn't flow. These kind of things. Some may be saying, some may be asking, one may be even debating. But you are not the first one. This is not a new one. Actually, 500 years after Buddha passed away, of course we learn in the scripture, it's written in the scripture. 500 years after Buddha passed away, right now about 2,500 years. So let's say 2,000 years ago. There are some people or monks or bhikkhus have already asked questions. The way they propose is, or post it is, okay, we are practicing Buddha Dhamma. What's the reason? Practicing Buddhism Dhamma is to know the true nature of mind and matter. Oh yes, that's right. So, if that's the case, is it not enough if one knows or one's aware the true nature of mind and matter? If one is fully aware of the mind and matter. Well, if you post that way, you can't say, yeah, the purpose is to know the true nature of mind and matter. And if you know or if you're aware of the nature of the object that you're observing, that's what it is. Why do we need to label or note? That's kind of question is posed. So in here, let's look at it. We are going to take it directly from the scripture. In the scripture it is said, Gaye, we will say, that's a word. The best I could translate it to communicate is, when you know the body, know the body that it is the body. When you know the body that it is the body. What it is, when you know the body, means when you experience the body. Okay? You're observing this, your physical body, in other words, is the rupa matter. Physical body, whatever is happening, hot, cold, move, and so on. So when you know the body is when you are experiencing the body, what is happening at the present moment. At that time, know that body. In other words, know that experience of the body, that it represents the body or rupa, materiality. You are observing the body, you experience it. When you experience this, know that experience represent what is called the body or the rupa. Gaye, we will say, that is what it means. That's in the scripture. So, if you are observing the body, call the body as body. Note the body as body. Okay? When we say the body could be hot and cold, and so on. The qualities of the physicality or rupa. Call the body as body. Don't call it is feeling. Because it's very close. Even though you might be observing the body, some specific quality of the body, at that moment you might be confused with the feeling. Okay, whether it's a feeling or the body. Feeling means pleasant, unpleasant. Sometimes you might be feeling pleasant, sometimes you might be feeling unpleasant, but as you are observing the body, you will simply automatically call it, this is the body, rupa. These kind of little misunderstanding or wrong acknowledgement could happen. So it is very important to call what it is as it is. Okay, if there's a craving, call it craving. If it is wanting, call it wanting. If it is desire, call it desire. At that moment, exactly as you are experiencing. Do not just fall under the wrong word for the experience that you are having. So in here, let's look at it. The reason why we are doing is the simple awareness, because the question is posed as long as you are aware of what is happening at this moment, isn't that enough? Simple awareness of the object without precise understanding, okay? Without having the precise knowing of the object is not a complete observation. Sometimes you just say, you're just aware, oh, I'm aware of this and aware of that, and move on and on and on and on like a flow, like a string, okay? One after the other. I know, I'm aware. That kind of awareness is not sufficient in this method. It is good up to a point, but it is not considered as complete, totally complete yet. So simple awareness without knowing precisely what it is not a complete observation. You must be able to describe what the experience is. You must know in terms of the concept what the experience is. You must know as it is or as it really is. Okay. And if you don't know exactly what it is precisely, what happened was you haven't reached the clarity of understanding on the object. You haven't reached the clarity of understanding on the object of observation. In other words, your observation is not penetrative. When it is not penetrative, you do not reach clarity. You know somewhat, but full clarity is not there. That's what happened. Okay. Let's pick up the same example, the same old example we always use, rising and falling. Okay. You say rising, falling, and rising and falling, rising and falling. What is rising and falling? Are you thinking about rising and falling? Then it's not. Or sometimes you might even go into the concept-wise, rising and falling, or rise, fall. Rising is rising, or let's put in a different word, becoming. Falling is passing away. Oh, it becomes, it passes away, it rises, it passes away. Here you are noting rising, falling. In your mind, the concept-wise is you are observing the arising and passing away. And if that's the case, that's not correct. You are not observing or noting the arising and passing away. You are observing rising, falling means you are observing the rising is expansion of your abdomen. Falling means you are observing the contraction of the abdomen. That is the correct. There's a rising movement, you observe it, you experience it. There's a falling movement, you observe it, you experience it, and you actually know this is the expanding movement, this is the contracting movement. To be able to that kind of a precise, clear understanding, you need label. When you label it, it totally equates what the experience is and what it is in terms of your conceptual understanding. That's what labeling is. Labeling is a conceptual word that precisely represents what that object you are observing. So because of that, this labeling, you do that so that it's represent exactly what you are experiencing. Don't think about arising and passing away. Don't think about impermanence, or don't take it as impermanence. So one must be very clear about, if you are thinking, know that it is thinking. If it is hot, know that it is hot. By saying thinking, thinking, you're confirming the precise understanding. By saying hot, hot, you're confirming your precise experience. Hard or cold or pleasant or unpleasant. Whatever that conceptual word you are labeling or you are noting is the direct, exact representation of the experience as it is. That's what labeling is doing. It's reinforcing your experience with full clarity between the practical aspect and conceptual word, connecting the two. That's what this labeling does. So, in other words, one must know exactly as it is taking place, or one must know exactly as it is happening. There's a Pali word, what it means, that one must know exactly as it is happening or as it is, called Bhutan Bhutatam Pasati. Bhutan Bhutatam Pasati. One must know exactly what is taking place or as it is happening, as it really is happening. Bhutan Bhutatam Pasati. So these things are not just make up recently in the last 50 years by Mahasi method. These are exactly from the scripture, and these kind of questions are posed over 2,000 years ago, and it is recorded, and the answers to those posed questions are also stated. And from those things, trying to pick up, and I'm re-narrating it. So labeling is basically the confirming that one truly knows the object as it is. One truly knows the experience, how it is presented in a conceptual concept and the practical aspect connecting. So they are two little branches woven together. And especially the beginners of this particular method, you must do, or you must practice, you must note, you must label whenever you are observing and experiencing it. To the point, you note and you label it to the point, eventually it becomes natural to you. First of all, it's a little bit not flowy, but if you keep on doing again and again and again, it will become natural. So for the beginners, you must label it, you must note it till it becomes fairly natural to you. So in here is, look at it. That's number one of this thing. To give an example, why and what. Let's say a child about 2 years, 3 years, 4 years old. They are starting to learn the language, and especially written language. A, B, C, D, and then C, A, T, cat, or D, O, O, R, door. At the beginning, they just look at it and they don't know. They actually have to spell it out aloud. C, A, T, cat. And then they know that represent a little kitten. D, O, O, R, door, that it represents the door. At the beginning, they cannot just say cat, door. They have to spell it out, spell it out, spell it out. And eventually, when they become used to it, when it becomes natural, whenever they see the word cat and door, they don't have to spell it out. They simply know cat, door, automatically, and so on. That's how the child, when they start learning, that is how they do. They say it out aloud, spell it out aloud. And when they become natural, you don't have to go through that process again. The same thing here. The yogi or the practitioner has to label it mentally in your mind. Expansion, contraction, hot, cold, feeling, anger, happy. You have to accurately, mentally say it at every experience of your observation. That's number one in this method one need to do. And why do we have to do it? Okay, we already explained why. To know, to confirm, so that we know as it is and practice enough to become natural. There is also other aspect. Other aspect is whenever you are saying out or labeling mentally about it, rising, sitting, falling, touching, rising, sitting, falling, touching. These words, okay, you know conceptually rising and sitting is a two different thing. Sitting and falling is a two different thing. So by saying these words, by labeling these words, you give yourself an understanding of separation between one object to the other, between one process to the other. You cannot really say or believe or perceived that rising and sitting is the same, or it's a flow. You know exactly those two are entirely two different processes. So by putting label, you give separation between one object to the other, one object to the other. If you don't say it automatically, simply awareing, you know the rising, you know the sitting, you know the falling, they seems like continuously one connected to the other, one is eventually it becomes like a continuous line, continuous loop, unbroken, a flow. That's the way you will perceive it. But by labeling it, it gives separation between one object to the other. That's another one. And in here, you have a label and you have the experience. Experience is one thing. Arises when you observe it, you experience it. And label is the description of the experience. So there are two processes. One is the experience and one is the label. You are doing two things together, but they are entirely different. One is the experience, one is the confirmation of the experience in the conceptual way. As you are saying two together, now one must be very careful. Most of your energy and attention and focus must be on the experience. And very little attention is given to the concept, the word, the label. You don't give 50-50 emphasis. Let's say 90-95 on the experience and 5 to 10 on the word. And there are two things you are doing, and that kind of emphasis need to be given. Because, let's look at it in a different way. There's a painting and there's a frame around it. When one is looking at it, you give more emphasis on the painting itself, not on the frame, but at the same time you are aware of the frame, but with very little attention. Just like that, you have to look at it. The experience is just like the painting itself, and the label is the frame, and the distribution of attention is different. That is one thing one need to understand too. And then the next one. Okay. The next one is, if you take care of all these things and if you keep on observing, what will happen is one will slowly and slowly become skillful. Slowly and slowly become skillful is your coordination between this labeling and the experience or knowing become very good. You know how to coordinate between these things, labeling process and experiencing the process, experience of the object. You become skillful. That's the fourth step you go in. And you keep doing it. Slowly and slowly your coordination better. And if your coordination better, the next level that you'll be arriving is you will know how to observe with precision. That is the quality you begin to get. First of all, you know how to coordinate, and then once the coordination you become skillful, that means you know how to observe with precision. That's the number 5 level. And once you know how to observe with precision, what happens is, suddenly you will find out you can observe it without labeling. Okay. At first you have to label. Now you can observe it without labeling, but at the same time your distribution of attention is perfect, and at the same time you know every objects are occurring separately, one after the other, not like a continuous flow, not like an unending process going on. You know each one arises, passes away, another one arises, passes away, another one arises, passes away. But now, without labeling, you will have the same experience. That is what is the method is intended for. But till to that point, please label, do label, must note. But at one point, you will reach that stage. You don't need labeling. Okay. Not only that you don't need labeling, you might even find that labeling become an obstacle. It unfolds by itself, just like a baby. At first it crawl and then walk, step, till it become master and can walk and can run. Then they don't have to go back. If they can walk and run, that crawling is becoming a nuisance, nonsense. Same. So in here, if you look at it, these are the instructions about how to note, how to label. And even though these are given the same instruction to every yogis or every meditators, those fall into 2 groups. Okay. One group is somebody who take this instruction very seriously and implement it exactly. That's one group. Another group is no, they just go into a lot of thinking and reflection and dissecting about this instruction, and they go round and round and round and round, mostly in the thinking, reflecting, analyzing mode. Those two fall, and just by being how each one operates, their progress become totally different. The one who pick up as instructed without any dissection or analyzing, they progress very fast, and the other one never go beyond that state of analysis. And their analysis, they are quite happy and satisfied. I understand conceptually, theoretically, but they think they have the growth in Dhamma, which is not. So in here is, if one is picked up and then this method and practice exactly as it is, what will happen was it will become skillful. And when you become skillful, at the beginning you will start seeing the object arises, and then the object exists, and then object disappear. In other words, the experience of the object is in three parts: the beginning, the middle, and the end. That's how one will experience. The experience will consist of three parts: beginning, middle, and end. In other words, see, from the beginning to the end, the whole process, you will see, you will experience. That is the earlier part. And then suddenly you exercise, practice the same thing again and again and again, and suddenly you starting to find out, suddenly the middle part starting to disappear. And whenever you observe, you know exactly it arises or it starts, and then suddenly it passed away or it ends. In other words, second one is you only experience the beginning and the end. Every object that comes in arise and suddenly, swiftly disappear. Arise, swiftly disappear. There is no distinctions or awareness of the middle part. That is the progress. And if you want to talk it in terms of words and scriptures and stuff like that, that part is called, if you have reached the insight knowledge of arising and passing away. In Pali it's called Udayapaya Jnana. When you have arisen or achieved this Udayapaya Jnana or insight knowledge of arising and passing away, all that you see is whenever you observe an object, you simply see it comes to be and gone, comes to be and gone, but very distinct. Arising and passing away is distinct. Okay. And at that level, you will find, okay, you can observe or you can note without labeling. There is no labeling, but you can see all the separation, all the separateness of mind and effort, and cause and effect, arising and passing away, the nature of impermanence. At that level, without labeling, you can experience these things, and it is not the never-ending continuous flow of mind and matter. That's a key point in Vipassana. Some yogis are very good, strong, but what they see is the flow of continuous flow of mind and matter, mind and matter, mind, matter, matter, mind, matter, continuous flow. And if that's the case, you haven't reached to the Vipassana site yet. Vipassana site is you must be experiencing the arising and passing away. in a distinct, clear fashion. One object not connected to the other. That is Vipassana. But if you are experiencing and knowing everything like a flow, that's not in a Vipassana zone. So that is one. And at that moment you can drop labeling, and even if you label, it's become not a smooth flow. And once you practice and practice and practice as instructed, you will find suddenly that the beginning or arising part starting to disappear from your awareness. There's no beginning, there's no arising. Whatever object comes to your field of attention, all that you see is they are passing away. They are dissolution. Passed away, passed away, passed away. Everything is ending, ending, ending. Every object you experience is the ending of that object. The experience is the ending of the object, ending of the object, disappearing of the object, passing away of the object. That's one level. And at that level, in a proper word from the scripture is called Binga Jnana, insight knowledge of dissolution. Insight knowledge of dissolution. You got at that level, Binga Jnana. And at that moment, at that level, even if you want to label, you cannot label. Even if you want to label, you cannot label. That wanting of the label simply disappear, disappear, disappear. All that it is the disappearance of all objects. That is in terms of three parts. Beginning, middle, end. Then the middle disappear. Beginning and the end. The third one is only the ending. And related to the insight knowledge of arising and passing away, and insight knowledge of dissolution. Okay, on a practical level, I'll explain to you in a different way. At the beginning you observe, okay, let's say rising and falling. When you observe it, you experience, you know, you are aware of your physical tummy, physical abdomen, shape, size and color. That's called form. And also you are aware of the way it moves, fast or slow or jagged or sharp or obscure. And also you also know simply the movement. But you are aware of all of them. Sometimes you are more clear on the form, sometimes you are more clear on the manner of the behavior, sometimes you are more clear on the nature. All three of them. And slowly what happened was, as you keep on practicing, that form, the sense of tummy, starting to disappear. And then slowly, even the style and the nature, the style and the behavior disappear. In other words, form and manner disappear, and all that you are aware is the true nature, simply the vibration movement. But in here too, one has to be very clear. You think that there's a vibration and movement and you know it, that's one thing. But when it truly disappears, form and manner disappear, it is not that there's a movement and that you know. It is simply the movement. And there's a awareness. It is not that I know. Simply the movement and awareness. In other words, the object phenomenon disappear, and also observing phenomenon disappear. and all that it is left is the true nature, simply vibration. That's what happened. And that is how one uses labeling technique or noting technique in this method. And I give you a step-by-step progression of how it works, why we need it, what we are using for, and when we don't need it. And finally, even if we want it, you can't do it. Had explained in terms of jnana, had explained in terms of form, manner, and nature. Have explained to in some of objective phenomenon, subjective phenomenon, and simply the true nature. So may all of you be able to practice this Satipatthana Vipassana meditation, especially for beginners. Try and become skillful at using this labeling technique because it helps you a great deal, especially directing towards the field of Vipassana, step by step, without going into the continuous streams of awareness. It has its benefits. For that reason, it is put here. Of course, Mahasi method, we use the rising and falling. But this labeling or noting is not new. It comes from the time of the Buddha. And the first revolt or question against the usefulness of this labeling is questioned 2,000 years ago. I like you to have the clarity on it. May all of you be able to practice this mindfulness-insight meditation correctly and precisely, and may you be able to attain cessation of mind and matter as soon as possible. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Buddham Bhajami. Dhammam Bhajami. Sangham Bhajami.